There are thousands of Albertans joining us live. I'm sure thousands more will watch this on repeat. And I am thrilled to have a few moments with you today to talk a little bit about me, about our vision for Alberta, about building a better Alberta together. And I know that you come from all kinds of different places. Some of you are stalwart New Democrat supporters who've been part of this party for a long time. Some of you are wondering who this guy is as part of that conversation. Some of you are folks who've been with me through the battles, through 11 years as mayor. And some of you, the vast majority of you, are people who've never belonged to a political party before, but are now getting engaged and excited about the future of Alberta. And I want to say to all of you, welcome to this conversation. I'm thrilled to be talking to all of you today about the future of this province that we love so very much. Now, I'm going to speak for a little while. I'll try to speak for a short period so that we have some time for questions. And I've been saying that in public life for 15 years, and I have yet to succeed speaking short so we have more time for questions, but I will try. And hundreds of you have submitted questions. So we have some number of questions, I don't even know how many, that are going to be submitted to me from the ones that you have submitted that will look at a lot of the themes that you've talked about. So that's the plan for this next little time together. I'm sure that I will drive the poor people filming this crazy because I probably will not stick to the plan, but I am thrilled to be able to chat with you a little bit today. So first of all, let me tell you that I am feeling two simultaneous emotions right now. The first emotion is deep gratitude. I'm deeply grateful to all of you for your interest in Alberta and your interest in building a better community together. For those of you who've been NDP members and volunteers who've knocked on doors, who've organized electoral district associations, I'm deeply grateful for your work in showing Albertans that there is a better alternative. I'm deeply grateful for living here in Alberta. I'm deeply grateful that we get to live on this land, the best place on earth, and be blessed here to be able to build an incredible future right here. My other emotion that I'm feeling right now is a bit of surprise. Surprise that I am doing this again. After 11 years in politics, I kind of thought I was done. And if you've ever heard me speak before, you know that I always talk about the same word. It's a Sanskrit word, the word seva. Seva means service. It means selfless service. So I'm grateful to all of you for your seva, but I kind of thought I'd be doing my seva in a different way now. In the couple of years since I have stepped down from being mayor, I've created a really nice little life for myself, working across Canada and around the world, helping people build more resilient communities, more sustainable communities, based on the concept of community service and civic engagement and getting people involved in their own futures. It's been a good life. It's been a good retirement. But I'm also an Albertan. Like all of you, I love this place. I grew up here. And in my late 20s, after living and working all around the world, I chose to come home and to make my life here. And like all of you, I've been increasingly concerned about the direction of our province, not just this government, but where we are going as a province as a whole. And to me, we are at a critical time in human history. We're at a time where the winds of change and crisis are buffeting us and they are blowing hard. And we are seeing 5 or 6 or 7 simultaneous forces acting on us, any one of which has the potential to completely destroy our civilization. Happy thought for a Thursday night. But I'm an eternal optimist. And I believe that precisely because we're dealing with all of these things at once, precisely because the pandemic in particular has upended all of our thinking about how society works, we are also living in a moment of extraordinary creativity. A moment of creativity unlike anything anyone alive today has seen before. A moment where we get to choose our future. I call it a wet clay moment. A moment where we get to mold the future we want for ourselves, our children, and our grandchildren. But here's the thing about wet clay. If you don't mold it at the moment it's wet, it hardens. And once it hardens, you can't change it without breaking it. And you know that there are forces out there right now that are trying to mold that clay into an image that we're not entirely comfortable with. And we have to find our voice, take our voice, and build that future that we want and we need. I know the last 4 years have been exhausting. The pandemic, economic uncertainty, horrific political discourse, dealing with this UCP government. And I know that we are exhausted. But I need to tell you something today. And what I need to tell you is that the fight is worth it. And we are called upon now more than ever to rejoin that fight, to use everything we've got to, I need to create a phrase here, take back Alberta. To take back Alberta, to build the kind of Alberta that we need together. And that's why I'm so excited that we are all here together right now. Because the things we're facing are huge. Certainly, the ongoing impacts of the pandemic, the lack of lessons that we've learned from it, and the fact that we're not ready for the next public health crisis. An ongoing mental health and addictions crisis. 1 in 4 of us will be formally diagnosed with mental illness in our lifetimes. 4 out of 4 of us will struggle with our mental health. Every one of us will. And then you add that to the headlines. We're losing lives full of potential every single day to drug poisoning. Since the advent of the Alberta model of recovery, the number of people dying of drug poisoning in our province has increased 2.5 times. We're in a crisis. This is happening under incredible economic dislocation. The levels of inequity in our society are higher than they've ever been. The rich are getting richer, but for most of us, it's getting harder and harder to get by. And when we add that to automation and artificial intelligence changing the nature of work, the whole economic deal on which our society is based is shifting. The whole deal that if you play by the rules and you work hard and you go to work every day, you deserve to live a life of security. You deserve to live a life without fear. You deserve to live a life where you're building for future generations. The whole deal seems to be gone now. And that's fundamentally disconcerting and difficult and unmooring for so many people. For the first time since the Industrial Revolution, kids graduating high school today are expected to be less financially well off than their parents. And if you think that frightens young people, think of how much it frightens their parents. Folks who have played by the rules their whole life, expecting the answer, which is, I work hard, I do what I need to do so my kid can have a better life, and now I can't be guaranteed of that. We can understand why our neighbors are so nervous, but there's more. We're also doing this in the context of the largest issue that we're facing as a species ever, which is the need to take real action on climate change. The time for easy, safe solutions is long gone, but we need to somehow figure out how Albertans and Alberta can take our rightful place as leaders in the fight against climate change instead of bystanders to it. We're also facing in the world right now one of the most difficult questions that humanity has ever faced, the hardest question humanity always faces. And that question is, how do we live together? How do we share land? How do we live with people who are fundamentally different than us so that everyone can live a life of dignity? Some people call that equity. I call it human rights. How do we manage through a system where all of these things are happening at once with the backdrop of the most difficult geopolitical situation since the beginning of the Second World War, only this time with nuclear weapons? It's a lot. And there's no wonder that many of our friends and neighbors are feeling fundamentally uncomfortable, dislocated, unmoored, that they don't know what is going to happen. There's a lot of fear, there's a lot of anger. And that is completely understandable. But it's times like this that we need leaders, that we need a government that can help guide us through these difficult times. We need a government that is smart, that is capable, that is pragmatic, and that is above all ethical. Because when you don't have guideposts in the economy or in society, you have to turn to your true north guidepost, your own values and your own ethics. It's not too much to ask for. You can probably guess my next line. We don't got that. We've got a government that is fundamentally the opposite of that. We have a government that, I had 6 different premiers while I was mayor, 3 different political parties, 2 different prime ministers from 2 different political parties, and I have never seen a government like the one we've got right now. I've used some uncharacteristically harsh for me language to describe this government. I have called them not only incompetent, but unethical and dangerous. And someone asked me recently in Edmonton to add the word reckless. And I think that is the most accurate word of all. I have never seen a government before, and I've been a student of politics my whole life. I have never seen a government before that is so fundamentally disinterested in the act of governing. So many examples. Just this week, we learned that doctors in Edmonton have been ringing the alarm bells for 2 years on the lack of capacity for neonatal intensive care units. In short, premature babies are not being fed on time because we don't have the capacity to give them the food at the moment they need it. And the premier and the health minister's response to this is, we had no idea. And don't worry, we can airlift those newborn babies to somewhere where they can get the care that they need. Here, in one of the wealthiest jurisdictions in the world, we can't take care of premature babies. This is a government that doesn't know what it's doing. They are fundamentally only interested in 2 things, picking fights and wasting money. And they're good at both of those things. But while they're indulging themselves in their friends, life is getting harder for the rest of us. And that's why we need better government, and we need it now. That's why I was pulled out of my much-deserved and much-loved retirement to come back into this world. It wasn't supposed to be me. I just realized that I could probably help get a better government in place. I realized that today's Alberta NDP represents the values that I believe in. And I'm going to talk a little bit more about those in just a second. But enough people across the province said to me, look, this is no time to be a bystander. None of us can be bystanders right now. Every single one of us has to put in every single thing we've got in order to build a better future for ourselves, our kids, and our grandkids. And enough people said to me, look, Naheed, you have a very limited set of skills. There is not a lot of things that you are good at. This is true. Do not ask me to come help you with home repairs. Things will not go well. Do not ask me to help change the oil in your car. It won't work. But folks have said the one thing you can do is try and unite people around a common cause. So here I am, adding a little bit of orange to my purple. Understanding that the party that so many of you have built, that Rachel Notley and her team have built, is now not just a formidable political machine. 750,000 people voted for the NDP in the last election. But it is also an organization that represents the values of Albertans. And our job now is to invite more of our friends and neighbors into this conversation. So you know that I've always worn purple. And you can't see it in this angle, but yes, I'm wearing purple socks today. And most people understand the real reason that I've always worn purple. It looks good on me. Brings out the color of my eyes. Well, it's not just that. And a lot of folks will say, well, purple is a mix of conservative red and liberal blue, and it's calling people to what I call the muscular middle. That is true. And if you're wondering, well, why isn't orange a part of that? I did, in fact, Google, what do you get when you combine orange and red and blue? You get brown. I'm already there. But more importantly, the purple isn't about left, right, center. I don't think that's relevant to most people. The purple is an invitation. It's an invitation to folks to say, let's not define ourselves by who we think we are. Let's define ourselves by our common humanity. So adding a little bit of purple to the NDP orange is about opening the doors to a broader conversation with our friends and neighbors. This is not about a takeover of the party. The N in NDP does not stand for Naheed Democratic Party, and nor should it. This party does not need a savior. What the party needs is the ability to talk to more of our friends and neighbors. And the movement that we've created is something that's really exciting for me. But in my conversations around the province with longtime NDP supporters, with people who've never voted NDP before, I found, and I'm not at all surprised, that when you ask people, what do you want from your province, they all say the same thing. Strong public services publicly delivered with a focus on education and healthcare. Looking after the most vulnerable, not punching down on them. Ensuring that we've got a strong economy, supporting businesses small and large to build prosperity for all of us. Ensuring that the industry that has built so much of our prosperity, the energy sector, the oil and gas sector, continues to be able to build prosperity into the future as we navigate a wrenching transition. Understanding that this all has to be done while reducing the cost of living for people and keeping a firm eye on the books, as NDP governments across the prairies have always done. These are values not only that Albertans share, but they are the values of today's Alberta NDP. And that's why for me it's important that more of our friends and neighbors know about these things. Now, a lot of you have asked me, talk to us more specifically about some of your policies. And we'll get a chance to do that in some of the questions, as I understand it, that will be coming forward. And I also want to say to you, there is a bit of a caveat here, which is I am well aware that I am running for leader of the opposition. It's 3 years before we'll have an election. And so I want to ensure that today we're talking about the ethical guideposts and the values that will guide us towards the policy that we'll create in 3 years. I don't want to make promises today that may not meet the fact situation in 3 years, because we don't know what hell the UCP is going to wreak upon us over those 3 years. And I also know that I'm not running for mayor. In other words, this is a team effort. And so the creation of the agenda that will help all Albertans going forward has to be one that's done in conjunction with the caucus, with all of you as new and old NDP members, and with Albertans as a whole. So I don't want to come out with a whole bunch of pre-baked things and say this is what we're going to do when we form government, inshallah, God willing, as we Muslims say. We're not allowed to make positive statements about the future in my faith tradition because it incurs the wrath of God. So I'm throwing in inshallah, God willing, as we talk. But when we form government in 2027, inshallah, we want to make sure that we are acting on what Albertans need at that moment. And we're going to spend the next 3 years talking to Albertans and building that platform together. But there are some things that we should talk about where our values lie. First of all, building a prosperous economy, a more prosperous Alberta, supporting industries throughout the different stages of growth, through working on economic development to diversify our economy while supporting the energy sector through its transition. These are things I did for 11 years as mayor of Calgary and that I will continue to do. We need a more affordable Alberta. Right now here in this province, our utility rates are by far the highest in the country. Our auto insurance rates are 2.5 times what they are next door in Saskatchewan. This is all a result of bad UCP government policy. These are things that we can work on, that we will be able to do while we're building prosperity. Of course, our public healthcare system is not just on the brink of collapse, but in many ways has collapsed, particularly in smaller centers across Alberta. I grew up in a family that was very poor, and it was public services that sustained me. I graduated from great public schools. I got everything I needed from the public library and the public swimming pool and public transit. But most important, for a family that's struggling, we always knew the one thing we didn't have to worry about is going bankrupt if someone fell ill, because the public healthcare system was always there for us. And so rebuilding the public healthcare system, that's going to take a lot of money. We got to find the money to sustain the system properly. But it also starts with a baseline of respect. Respect for the people who work in the system. From the newcomer racialized women who work at the front lines who keep the system going, to the doctors, to the nurses, to the administrators, to everyone who's invested their time, their energy, their lives into the system. Let's start by respecting those choices and understanding that we're all in this together to build a healthier system for everyone. Of course, public education, I've talked about it a lot. If you talk to teachers right now, they will tell you that things have been getting worse and worse and worse, but they've never been this bad. That the last 2 years have shown a real sea change in how we're teaching our children. Class sizes are getting unmanageable and more complex. There's no funding for education assistants who haven't had a raise in a decade, and who wants to do that job? There is no ability to have enough physical space for the students we need. The Calgary Board of Education this year added enough students that they could have built 22 new schools and filled them this year. They have 1 school on the UCP capital plan. We cannot keep doing this. We've got to be able to invest both K-12 and advanced education to build what we need. We got to work on mental illness. Mental health and addiction is a major part of my work as mayor. I'm really proud of the City of Calgary's world-leading plan on mental health and addiction. We've got to recognize that what the UCP is doing is not working, and too many people are leading lives of serious desperation. We've got to expand equity. We've got to make sure that every single human being who's lucky enough to share this land has the chance to live a life of dignity, a life of opportunity, and a life of prosperity. That's the true promise of this place, that regardless of what you look like or where you come from or how you worship or whom you love or your level of ability, you deserve to live here, you deserve to live safely here, you deserve to live a life where you have opportunity right here. And under Danielle Smith and the UCP, we've been losing that, and it's time for us to get it back. Of course, a greener and safer Alberta. Albertans are telling us that we cannot be bystanders to climate change. We cannot let it happen to us. We are blessed here with abundant natural and human resources. We should be leaders in the world battle against climate change. We should have the world look to us for solutions for how to protect against fire and drought and flood, but also how to build a sustainable energy sector for the world. And that means investing across Alberta in large communities and small communities. It means understanding how Albertans are thinking, no matter where they live. Many things are universal, kinds of things I've talked about, but there are specific issues that are also facing Albertans in small communities and in smaller communities and in rural areas that we need to be able to not only be responsive to, but help them understand that the Alberta NDP is a party that listens to their problems and comes to the table with solutions, unlike the UCP. So we'll get into some more of this when we answer the questions, but I want to highlight a couple of things. The first one is, look, I've known Danielle Smith for 30 years. We went to university together. We took a class together. The professor was a guy called Peter Naheed. I feel like I was paying attention in that class. But I think we have to let more of our friends and neighbors understand that Premier Naheed would not have been comfortable with this version of the Conservative movement. I knew Premier Klein pretty well. We fought a lot. I may have once lit his platform on fire in front of a bunch of TV cameras when I was president of the Students' Union. But Mrs. Klein also asked me to speak at his memorial service. I knew him pretty well. And I can tell you that he too would be uncomfortable with this version of the Conservative Party and the Conservative movement. Does that mean the NDP has to become conservative? Not at all. What it does mean is we have the opportunity right now to help our friends and neighbors across this province see that the party that reflects their values is in fact the Alberta NDP. That's our challenge. But the good news is we're up to it. So I first declared that I was running for leader of the Alberta NDP just under 6 weeks ago. And in those 6 weeks, the creation of this movement has been something like I've never imagined. As Raki said, we're having rapturous standing ovation, standing room only crowds in places like Red Deer and Lethbridge and Sherwood Park. Albertans are getting super excited about the potential for the future. And listen, I know it's not about people wanting to see more of this incredibly handsome face. What it is about is so many Albertans have told me, young and old, newcomers, and people who've been here forever, folks from the Indigenous communities, everyone has really told us that this is the first time in the decade of politics where they're suddenly feeling like there's someone who is talking about a positive view of the future. So many people have said to me, this is the first time in a long time since Rachel was premier that I've given myself the permission to feel like something is better and something better is possible. And so our job is to take that hope and that optimism that people are feeling in this Alberta spring and turn that into an unstoppable movement. We have a lot of work to do, but that work is going to be crafted by every single one of you and all of our friends and neighbors continuing to build that movement to that better Alberta that we know is possible. So I've got some action items for you before we go to the questions. Number one is I have been shocked to learn, shocked I tell you, that many Albertans do not think about politics 24/7. I know. They have lives and work and family and hobbies and sports. I don't know about any of those things. But the number one thing that I have heard from our neighbors is, hey, Naheed, we love you. We support you. We'll vote for you in the election. When is that? 3 years from now? And when I say, well, no, first we have to win the leadership. And to do that, you have to buy a membership. I get sort of blank stares. So I'm asking you to help me and help all of us remind all of our friends and neighbors that if you don't have a membership by midnight on Monday, you will not get a ballot and you will not be able to vote. We do not want our friends and neighbors to have FOMO. So we have to get them to put down their $10, go to nenshi.ca, put down their $10 and purchase their membership. Now my team tells me that I need to tell you all to sell 5 more memberships each or 10 more memberships before Monday. And I'd love it if you could do it. Please do it. But I want to tell you one other thing. If every single member of the Alberta NDP can sell 1 more membership between now and Monday, just one. And remember, it's to anyone over the age of 14, and you don't have to be a citizen as long as you're resident in Alberta. If every single one of us can sell 1 more membership, then we will be the largest provincial party in Canadian history, larger than the UCP. That is the movement that we're creating. And that is the chance that we have to change this place forever. I'll say a little bit more about that at the end, but for now, I've talked for way too long. I think the folks running the stream are getting very frustrated with me because we got a lot of questions to get to. So let's go to some of your questions now. I've been thrilled to receive endorsements from 9 members of the Alberta NDP caucus, amazing, hardworking MLAs, and we thought it would be fun to get them to ask some of the questions that you have submitted. So let's go to our first question now.
Hi, Cord Ellingson here, MLA for Calgary Foothills and campaign co-chair for the Nenshi for Alberta campaign. I have a question from Gil in Edmonton. How will you fight the anti-trans policies that are slated to come into effect in the fall? And if the NDP should form the next government, how will you be able to reverse these?
Thank you, Court. Thank you, Gil, for the question. It will not surprise any of you to know that I was deeply troubled by Danielle Smith and the UCP's introduction of the most regressive anti-trans legislation anywhere in North America. It goes much further than Ron DeSantis in Florida, for example. It takes away the right of physicians and parents to choose the best medical treatment for their children. It interferes in the relationship between a child, a parent, and a doctor, and it does so for strictly ideological reasons. So of course, we're going to oppose it. We've already been working, and I personally have already been working to blunt some of the rougher edges of this particular translation because, as always, the Premier announced it without thinking it through. And of course, should the NDP form government in 2027, we will repeal this immediately. But I want to say something more, something very political. To me, it actually doesn't matter what you think about trans people. Maybe you don't like them. Now you're wrong, and I will spend a lot of time proving to you that every human being is created perfect and every human being deserves to live with dignity on this land. But setting that aside, if for whatever reason you're not comfortable with trans people, let me tell you this. We have a government where the premier bragged about the fact that she did polling and potentially focus groups to try and determine which vulnerable group was the least popular. And she chose vulnerable children. Regardless of what you think about trans people, if you believe that demonizing children who already have a high rate of self-harm and suicide is something that a real government does, then you and the government have lost the moral authority to govern. This is no longer just about picking fights for fun. This is about real people and their real lives. We have every right to be angry about it, and we have every right to protect vulnerable children in every possible way we can.
Hey everyone, I'm Raki Pancholi, MLA for Edmonton Whitemud and Executive Chair of the Nenshi for Alberta campaign. So we have a question from Laura in Medicine Hat about education, one of my favorite topics. She asks, the recent curriculum overhaul has sparked significant controversy. What is your plan regarding the current curriculum review, and how will you ensure that all stakeholders, including educators and parents, have a voice in the process? Great question, Laura. Over to you, Naheed.
Thank you, Raki. Thank you, Laura, for that question. Obviously, there's a lot going on in education right now, and I've been doing some work over the last couple of years with the Alberta teachers on many things, but specifically on the curriculum review. I think all we need to know is that the provincial government, with very little advance warning, canceled the provincial achievement tests this year for grade 6 students. It is obvious the reason they canceled them is because they knew the students wouldn't do well because the curriculum rollout has been botched so badly. So we've heard a lot about the social studies curriculum, but the curriculum that has already been implemented in math and science and in wellness, including financial literacy, really was poorly done. The teachers had no time to prepare. They didn't have adequate resource materials. The whole thing seems cooked up on an ideological basis. So clearly it's not going to serve us going forward. So now we have to slow down or stop the implementation of the social studies curriculum, which is probably the most dangerous of all of them. But also we need to ensure that we trash this draft and that we actually start again to create a modernized curriculum that will in fact prepare our students for life in the 21st century with all of the fundamental changes that I've been talking about. And we start by engaging experts as well as students and parents in the process instead of it being completely top down as it has been. So there's a lot to do in education, but the fundamental piece of that is ensuring that our students have a terrific curriculum from which to learn. Next question.
Hello everyone, I'm Rod Loyola, the MLA for Edmonton Ellerslie. Tracy from Calgary is asking about the relationship with the federal government. She asks, will you direct the province to participate in federally funded programs such as National Pharmacare, including free birth control and free diabetes medications, as well as housing program dollars, and drop the Alberta retirement plan?
Thanks, Rod. Thank you, Tracy, for that question. You know, when I was mayor, I had 6 different premiers from 3 different political parties. I also had 2 prime ministers, one conservative and one liberal, each for about half of my time. And with both of those parties, we negotiated more money for Calgary than any other major city in Canada. So that probably answers the question. Number one, cities being able to negotiate directly with the federal government gets stuff done. And we shouldn't be turfy about it and say, no, it has to come through us and build red tape and bureaucracy as the government is doing. But number 2 is you gotta be able to make a deal. And that is what this government is fundamentally incapable of doing. When we look at things like the clean electricity regulations or $10 a day daycare, or negotiating on housing, you got to be able to bring home the bucks and bring home the deal. And again, I look to Peter Lougheed here. There was no fiercer defender of Alberta than Peter Lougheed, but he also brought home deals. He brought home a constitution, for heaven's sakes. And this government just wants to go to court all the time, waste money on lawyers, rather than just sitting down and making a deal. I've proven that I can work with anybody. I can work with a Liberal or a Conservative or a New Democrat government federally, and I'll be able to bring home things that will improve the quality of life for Albertans. Let's go to the next question.
Hey folks, David Shepherd here, MLA for Edmonton City Centre and one of the Alberta NDP critics on health. And I have a question from Nancy in Calgary on healthcare. Her question is, what are your thoughts on what direction to take in healthcare to get more staff in home care, more long-term care and supportive living spaces, more room in our hospitals, and to lessen wait times in our emergency rooms?
Thank you, David. Thank you, Nancy, for that question. This is probably the single hardest question to deal with. We know that our system is not just at the brink of collapse, but that in many communities it has, in fact, already collapsed. This is a huge problem. And so what we have to do is understand that we've systematically starved the healthcare system of the resources it requires in order to actually function. And it's going to take money, and a lot of money, in order to refund that system at the level it needs to be funded. We're going to have to find the money, and we probably won't be able to do it in one budget. But we have to be able to get there. But we also have to get there based on a basis of respect for the people who work in the system. They have hard enough jobs already. They're asked to do superhuman things. And then to have government pile on to them on top and say they're union lackeys or lazy public servants, or they're not doing their jobs well, or denying them fair pay or benefits, or forcing by design the system to only hire part-time workers instead of full-time workers who don't get full benefits. These are all huge problems that we have to be able to sort through and make sense of. We have to ensure that the system works for patients, not for UCP insiders, as well as for the staff. But here is a big issue. I don't think very many Albertans would disagree with the statement, Alberta Health Services needs reform. But I think very few Albertans would agree with the following statement, and we trust Danielle Smith and Adriana LaGrange to get it right. Of course, they're not going to get it right. I have very little faith that they're going to be able to do that. But all of that said, 3 years from now, when we take government, inshallah, we cannot then turn to the people in the healthcare system and say, you've just been through a wrenching transformation. It was really hard. Let's do it all again. We have to figure out how to deal with what we inherit and help work with the people in the system, from the racialized women largely who work at the front lines, to all of the parahealth professionals, to the doctors, to the nurses, to the administrators, to everyone who's invested their time and energy in the system, and create a better system together that is patient-focused, but that treats the people in the system who work in the system with respect as well. 2 more quick things on this. If you peel back the onion that is Danielle Smith and just keep asking her, what's the problem with healthcare? What's the problem with healthcare? Despite the fact that she promised she would fix surgical wait times in 100 days, yet another broken promise, she will eventually say, AHS spends too much on management. Now, never mind that every study shows that AHS spends less on management than comparable health authorities. I just don't get this. And if you can figure it out, please explain it to me. If you think that Alberta Health Services spends too much on management, then how is creating 4 Alberta Health Services, each with their own management layers, going to reduce the amount we spend on management? Doesn't follow to me. I want to say one last thing, because you mentioned home care in your question. And I think home care is a great example of a system that is just full of grift and bureaucracy and that does not serve the patients it needs to serve. The goal of home care is to let people stay at home and to keep them out of rehab facilities and long-term care centers. But the system is built with this crazy mishmash of private providers and public funding and AHS trying to do risk management. So we're now in a situation where the people who work at the front lines, often poorly paid, newcomer, racialized women, are prevented from providing the care that they want to provide to the patients because of the bureaucracy. Because the care plan is so specific. But if the patient needs this, you can't do it because you might get fired from your job by actually giving the care that you want to give to the patient. It's a system that is run on fear and on bureaucracy instead of on patient care. And so telling the stories of these workers and their patients is something we can do while we're in opposition, helping people better understand just how broken the system is and coming up with suggestions. And again, how we can create a patient-focused system, a wellness and health system, not a sickness system, that nonetheless respects the rights and the dignity of the people that work in it. I think that's possible, and I think it takes leadership to make it happen.
Hi, my name is Marie Renaud. I'm the MLA for St. Albert. I have a question from George of Spruce Grove. George's question is this: how will you fix the desperate housing situation in Alberta, particularly the desperate housing situation for seniors? Thanks for the great question, George.
Marie, thank you, and thank you, George, for that question. Housing is a critical issue. It's something I've been working on for many, many years as mayor. I'm thrilled to see the federal government and the federal opposition parties suddenly wake up to their role in housing. But what I am concerned about is that this really laser-like focus on increasing supply of housing, which is correct, is not sufficient. If we only build more housing in the lack of a well-planned and well-regulated community, then we run the risk of building unaffordable, unsustainable, sprawling housing. And our goal needs to be to ensure that we're building the right house at the right price in the right place. And that means we have to empower municipal governments to do their job on building and on zoning and not try to get in their way. I think it's hysterical that Pierre Poilievre says municipalities must do blanket rezoning to get federal funding. And his acolyte Danielle Smith says, how dare the city of Calgary do blanket rezoning? That's a Trudeau-Gondek plan. It's so ridiculous. Again, just picking fights instead of solving problems. So our housing strategy needs to be a broad strategy that includes giving the private sector incentives to build more homes, particularly homes that appeal to markets like seniors, empty nesters, people just starting out. So it's just not all the same house being built over and over again that may not meet everyone's needs. We also need to invest significantly in the nonprofit sector to help us build affordable housing. And all of these things have to be done at once or we'll have a bunch of unintended consequences. We've got a great housing plan at the City of Calgary. Municipalities across the country have great housing plans, across the province, I should say, and across the country. And we need to be able to implement all of these plans in a thoughtful, non-ideological way that gets more housing built and more people into housing. All right, next question is from Barbara from Ponoka County.
Samir Kangande, MLA for Calgary Elbow here. I have a question from Barbara of Ponoka County, who's writing about rural strategy. She says, I live in a county which has a young farming and ranching community who are skeptical of government policy impacting their ability to farm. How do you plan to personally engage with them and other rural residents?
Thanks, Samir, for that question. Thank you, Barbara, for asking it. This is a critical issue for the Alberta NDP. If I have a criticism of the party since 2015, it is that we have not been present enough outside of Calgary and Edmonton. And I will say that I sort of hesitate using the term rural Alberta because I think in the party we have used it to describe everyone outside of Calgary and Edmonton. But of course, Albertans living in different kinds of communities have different needs. And I'm not sure that people in Airdrie think of themselves as rural Albertans, or a nurse in Red Deer, or an oil field worker in Fort McMurray. At the same time, there are people like Barbara's neighbors who are living in ranching and farming in a more rural lifestyle, and we have to be present and show up for all of them. And we have to resist the urge that progressive have often had to assume that we know what's best for people who don't vote for us. There's a famous book, maybe 30 years old now, called What's the Trouble with Kansas? That tries to ask why people in rural areas are always voting against their self-interests. But that assumes we know what their interests are. So the very first thing we got to do is show up. We have to show up and listen and help understand what people's concerns are. No surprise to anyone that when the government in 2015, the NDP government, tried to do a very well-intentioned thing to protect human rights for farm workers, they really hurt the relationship that we have as a party with people in farming and ranching. But we have so much in common with folks in every size community. Things I've already talked about, like healthcare and public education and the need to invest in them. I was talking to someone recently who was telling me our local school is half the size it used to be, but the classes are still massive because we can't attract and retain teachers in this area. People in southern Alberta tell me that when on a holiday weekend, you have to drive by 2 closed emergency rooms to get to an open emergency room. That's not showing that the Conservatives have done them any favors lately. We've talked a lot about the ability to get broadband throughout Alberta, a promise that has been broken consistently over 2 decades. It's preventing people from both participating in the global economy and watching Netflix. So all of these things are things that we've got to listen to folks about. We have to help them understand that today's Conservatives are not on their side, are not helping them, but also helping understand their very real concerns and needs and showing them that we too are their neighbors, that we live in those communities, that people like Barbara are there, and that we look after the concerns that they have in their lives. And that's what we have to be able to do together and build that strategy. President Obama famously had a 50-state strategy in 2008. He knew he wasn't going to win all 50 states, but he had to be present in all 50, and he had to create an ongoing movement in all 50. And we need an 87 riding strategy where we're doing that in every single riding across the province. All right, next question.
Hi everyone, Najwan Al-Junaid here, the Alberta NDP MLA for Calgary-Glenmore. I have a question here from Tamara in Calgary asking what concrete policies will you put forward to address the climate emergency while managing economic dependence on oil and gas?
Thank you, Najwan. Thank you, Tamara, for that question. The good news is we've got experts in this exact field in the caucus right now. And it's an area that I also know a little bit about. So here's the problem. This is not an us or them conversation. I spent a bunch of time this week with the leaders in the renewable sector in Alberta who also explained to me this is not an us or them question. Part of the issue is understanding the system better than our current government does. Every single time Danielle Smith tries to explain the electricity grid, it's like nails on a chalkboard for me because I do understand the electricity grid, having run NMAX all those years, and she fundamentally does not. And so the things she says are actually nonsensical. But people in the renewable sector tell me that with relatively small tweaks to the regulatory system, we could unlock billions of dollars of investment in our communities through the creation of renewable energy. Ultimately, we have to have an all-of-the-above energy strategy. We have to support the oil and gas sector through its transition. It's easy enough to say that the last barrel of oil burned in the world should be an Alberta barrel of oil, but we have to earn that. We have to earn that through the most stringent and thoughtful environmental, labor, gender, human rights practices that there are. We also need to invest in technology and in innovation, in renewables, in different kinds of energy systems in order to ensure that the lights stay on, but also that people around the world look to Alberta and say, they're doing it right. They understand what fighting climate change means. We need to follow their example. And I also believe that the provision of safe, affordable, clean energy is one of the greatest anti-poverty tools we have in the world. And Alberta needs to be at the forefront of creating that, the world's most sustainable energy sector. So there's a lot of very specific things we need to do, not only to reduce our emissions, but to position our economy as leaders in climate change instead of just saying that this is something that is happening and we're going to hope it doesn't happen. We're going to try and go back to some mythical future. We're going to try and be defensive about everything we've got instead of understanding that we're blessed with the smartest people in the world working on these issues in Alberta right now. And we have to open our minds and our hearts to innovation and to better answers, understanding that the climate emergency is real, that we have to take real action, and that our future prosperity depends on doing that in a way that continues to build our economy, and we will do that. All right, let's go to the next question.
Hey friends, this is Parmeet Singh Bopare, your MLA from Calgary Falcon Ridge and co-chair for the Nenshi for Alberta campaign. I have a question from Kim from Medicine Hat. What is your plan to help stop 5 people a day in Alberta dying from the drug poisoning crisis?
Thank you, Parmeet. Thank you, Kim, for that question, which is a question that is very close to me. I chose to make the cornerstone of my third term as Mayor of Calgary the creation of Canada's first action plan, community-based on mental health and addiction. It's called a Community of Connections, and it's worth checking out. The challenge we have right now is that this government is uniformly focused on one kind of addictions treatment that will work for many people, maybe for most people, but it's not going to work for everyone. And it's singularly focused on addiction, not on other mental health issues. So Calgary's plan, you can check it out on calgary.ca. It's called a Community of Connections. Calgary's plan is fundamentally based in 3 areas. The first one is being well. Being well in your workplace, in your school, on your sports teams, in your faith community, in all the ways that you interact in the community. And that means creating spaces that are mentally resilient, spaces that actively support people's mental health. We're not there yet, but I think we can do a lot of work towards that. Some people call that prevention. It's about much more than that. It's about ensuring that we can talk about our mental health and that we are supported in keeping our mental health strong. So that's being well. The second piece is getting help. Getting help where, when, and how you need it at the moment that you need it. So it really is making sure that the system is working to ensure that the resources that you need are available for you, whether those are medical resources, psychological resources, whether those are resources in the community. It means working with our partners in the nonprofit and public health sectors to ensure that we are doing more of the things that work and less of the things that don't work, making sure that the system is easily navigable, that in other words, people who, when they have a problem, know who to call and where to go. A lot of this comes from my personal experience in helping someone close to me who has been dealing with mental health and addictions challenges for a long time. And I've had trouble navigating the system. And I thought to myself, well, geez, I'm the mayor. I know everybody. And if I can't navigate the system, then how is a vulnerable person expected to be able to do it? So getting help where, when, and how you need it. The last piece is staying safe. People suffering from mental illness and addictions deserve to be safe. And those of us who encounter people on the train, on the street, who are suffering from mental health and addiction problems also deserve to feel safe. This means rethinking how we do community policing. It means rethinking how we support people in crisis. And I will tell you one thing I'm very proud of. I used to use as a thought experiment, imagine if someone you love is going through a mental health crisis and you call 911. And you hear 911, police, fire, or ambulance. Well, which one do you pick? Probably not fire. But if you pick ambulance, you know they're going to take your loved one to a crowded emergency room where they will be having a mental health crisis surrounded by very ill people, and there's not much that they'll be able to do for them at the hospital. If you choose police, if there's a safety concern, that might help you in the short term with your safety, but sometimes the presence of a uniformed police officer actually makes the situation less safe. So how do we fix that? Well, I'm pleased to tell you that in the city of Calgary, since the end of last year, if you phone 911, you hear police, fire, ambulance, or mental health. And if you choose mental health, then people who know what they're doing in times of crisis can be dispatched, and they can help the person dealing with the mental health crisis connect with resources they need to. And the best part about this project is it was very, very cheap. To cover the entire city with mental health first responders involved hiring fewer than 20 people. So this kind of innovation is what we need to do to be able to solve these problems. And specifically on the issue of drug poisoning, I'm really trying not to say the word overdose, which we've used in the past, because overdose implies you just took too much. But there's a lot of this stuff on the streets that's not safe at any dose. So I appreciate that Kim used the term drug poisoning in her questioning. We need the broad view of drug poisoning interventions. That includes harm reduction, because you can't treat someone who's dead. It includes enforcement against drug dealers and those who are preying on people, and of course it includes treatment. And the Alberta government's singular focus only on one aspect of treatment ultimately hurts. And we need a broader view that entails the entire list of harm reduction, treatment, and enforcement in order to help people live healthier lives. All right, our final question.
Hey everyone, Rhiannon Hoyle here, NDP MLA for Edmonton South and critic of advanced education. I have a question from Cass in Lloydminster. There are a lot of great ideas being put forward by other leadership candidates. Will you be integrating them into the NDP platform should you become party leader?
Rhiannon, thank you. Thank you for your service. Thank you, Cass, for that question. You know, this is something that I was a little bit worried about, if I can speak more broadly about teamwork in the NDP, because I do come from the outside. And I'm keenly aware that I wasn't there when there were 2 MLAs. I wasn't there when there were 4 MLAs. I didn't do the hard work of building this party into this amazing machine that it took. A lot of you did that work. And I want to honor that and ensure that everyone who has built this magnificent home always will have a home inside the Alberta NDP, even as we open our doors to even more Albertans, even more friends and neighbors to come and join us in this movement. But we have 38 extraordinary MLAs who are all committed and smart and capable. And we have to be able to make sure that they too feel like they're working to their best ability. And I love these leadership debates because they're not very much debates. There's only 1 or 2 things we disagree on, but I'm hearing people and I'm being educated every day by the other candidates, by Jody, by Sarah, by Kathleen, and by Gil, on the work that they believe in for the party. And every one of them, should they choose to, and should I be lucky enough to be the leader, will have a home and a great opportunity to contribute within the party going forward. You know, a lot of people, because I'm kind of big and I take up lots of space and lots of oxygen and I got a big mouth, a lot of folks think, oh, well, he's a lone wolf, you know, he's in this for himself. But I need to remind you that when you're mayor, you don't have a caucus. It's a purely legislative role. You only have 1 vote in Calgary out of 15. So you have to have 7 of your colleagues agree with you, at least 7, on every single thing you want to put forward. And we had a hugely ideologically diverse council. You know, we had Trump Party of Canada and Love Will Save Us All kind of on the council together. And the vast majority of what we did passed unanimously, or 14-1 or 13-2. We were able to create huge coalitions. And I will tell you, the thing that probably touched me the most in the last 6 weeks is when I read in the newspaper that one of my former colleagues had written a piece, probably the most right-wing member of City Council, Jeremy Farkas. And he wrote a piece in which he said, listen, I disagreed with Naheed almost all the time, but he always gave me space, he always listened to me, and he made me better at my job. And to me, that is what really means something to me. We're creating a broad coalition in this party. Not everyone is going to get everything they want. But the guarantee I've made to my caucus colleagues and to all of you is that you'll always get a fair hearing. That you'll always get a fair hearing with the leader, should it be me, You'll always get a fair hearing with caucus. We'll be able to air out different perspectives, and ultimately we'll make a decision and we'll move forward together. And that is, I think, the kind of leadership that I aspire to bring to the caucus as we are building this movement together. Wow. Thank you for all of that. Thank you for this extraordinary hour we spent together and for everything we've done over the last 5 months. There were many friends and colleagues who couldn't join today. Please spread the word. They can watch this live stream. And you know that we're going to do this together again. If you want to know more about where I stand, you can visit nenshi.ca/foralberta. And that'll give you a sense of a little more detail on the things we've talked about today. But ultimately, let's keep creating this movement together. So friends, we've signed up over 7,000 volunteers to this campaign already. I want that number to be over 10,000. Not because we need 10,000 people to run this campaign, but because we want to continue this movement. Because I want you to be able to say years from now that you watched this stream at the very beginning of something that changed Alberta forever. You know, the slogan of this campaign is "For Alberta, for all of us." And when I wrote that slogan, I thought that's how I would say it, emphasizing the word Alberta and the word all. But what I've learned over the last month or so is that the true power of this movement we're creating together is that tiny word for, F-O-R. Because for too long, politics here and everywhere for the last decade or so have been focused on being against. Our government is against Ottawa, they're against Trudeau, they're against Guilbeault, they're against vulnerable children, they're against the 2S LGBTQ plus community, they're against environmentalists, they're against activists, they're against the oil and gas sector, they're against people who think differently, they're against frontline workers, they're against people who worship differently. Ultimately, they're trying to get us to be against each other. But we are better than that. Because as I always say, it is impossible to have small dreams when you live under a sky that big. And now is our chance to be for a better future, to be for a better province, to be for ourselves and our neighbors and our kids and our grandkids. For Alberta, for all of us. Thank you all.